He mocked the black woman while signing divorce papers. Then the judge revealed her father's hidden fortune. The courtroom was cold, filled with an energy that felt almost suffocating. Ella Johnson sat at the table, her back straight, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap. The weight of the situation was heavy on her, but she remained still, calm, as she had done countless times before when faced with difficult circumstances. Her ex-husband, Mark Davidson, sat across from her, his face adorned with the same smug expression he had worn for years. Ella had always known that Mark took her for granted, but nothing prepared her for the way he treated her now, in the final moments of their marriage. The divorce was final, the papers ready to be signed, and with each stroke of his pen, Mark seemed to mock her. It was as if the years they had spent together meant nothing. Ella's mind drifted back to the beginning of their relationship. Mark had been charming at first. He had swept her off her feet, promising her the world. They had gotten married quickly, a whirlwind romance that seemed perfect at the time. But after the honeymoon phase faded, things began to change. Mark's true nature began to surface. He was condescending, dismissive, and always made Ella feel as though she wasn't enough. She had done everything for him. She had supported him emotionally, financially, and in every way a partner should. She had worked tirelessly, giving her all to the relationship, only to be met with indifference and disrespect. As the years passed, the emotional abuse worsened, and Ella found herself in a constant state of exhaustion, trying to keep up with the demands of a marriage that no longer served her. And yet, there she was, sitting across from Mark, watching as he carelessly signed the divorce papers that would end their marriage. He didn't even look at her when he did it. He didn't acknowledge the years of pain, the sacrifice, the struggle. He just signed the papers, as though she were nothing more than an inconvenience to be dealt with. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern demeanor, sat at the bench, watching the proceedings with little interest. Ella felt a deep sense of irony in the moment. The man who had spent years belittling her and making her feel small was now ending their marriage with a simple, dismissive gesture. He was so smug, so sure of himself. It made her sick to her stomach. As the papers were passed between them, Mark glanced at Ella with a smirk, the same smirk he had worn countless times before. It was the kind of smirk that said, "I'm in control. You are nothing!" The mockery in his eyes was palpable, and Ella couldn't help but feel a wave of anger rise within her. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she took a deep breath, swallowing the bitterness that threatened to overwhelm her. She had been here before, in moments when she had been told she wasn't good enough, when her voice had been silenced. But not today. Today she was going to reclaim her strength. She was going to walk out of this courthouse a woman with a new sense of power. "Your Honor," the judge said, breaking Ella's thoughts, "we will now proceed with the matter of the will." Ella's heart skipped a beat. Will? She hadn't known that there was any kind of will involved in this process. Her father had passed away several months ago, and she had settled his affairs. At least, she thought she had. There was no mention of anything significant that might be left to her, no large inheritance or estate waiting to be claimed. She was left with a modest sum and some personal belongings. But this felt different. The judge pulled an envelope from the stack of papers in front of him, its seal unbroken, its contents unknown. He glanced at both Ella and Mark, his gaze briefly lingering on Mark's smug expression before turning back to the papers. "This letter," he began, his voice low and measured, "was presented by Mr. Johnson's lawyer. It pertains to a legal matter regarding the late William Johnson's estate." Ella felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure what to expect, but nothing in her life had ever prepared her for the moment the judge began to read aloud. William Johnson, a man of integrity, left behind substantial assets. Among those assets was a sizable inheritance specifically designated for his daughter, Ella Johnson. Ella's heart raced. She had no idea her father had left anything of real value behind. The room fell silent as the judge continued. "Mark Davidson, the husband of the deceased's daughter, is explicitly excluded from this inheritance. The conditions of this will state that his actions over the years toward Ella Johnson were taken into account when drafting this document." Ella's eyes widened, but Mark's face remained unchanged, at least for a moment. He glanced briefly at the judge and then at Ella, disbelief flickering in his eyes. The judge read the terms of the will, and with each word, Ella felt the weight of her father's love and recognition of her suffering. The inheritance was hers. The house, the family business investments, and even a significant portion of her father's wealth were left specifically for Ella. And to Mark? Nothing. Not a single penny. But this was more than money. This was a statement. Ella's father had seen Mark for what he truly was, a man who had taken advantage of his daughter, belittled her, and mocked her time and again. Mark, stunned and disoriented, sat there for what seemed like an eternity. His smug grin had turned into a pale expression of disbelief. He reached for the glass of water in front of him, but his hand trembled slightly. The reality of the situation was sinking in. The life he had hoped to secure with his marriage to Ella, the wealth he assumed he could gain through her, had just been ripped away. The judge, continuing to read through the will, spoke of the emotional toll Mark's behavior had caused Ella. The will described in great detail the verbal and emotional abuse Ella had endured, and how her father had watched from afar, helpless but supportive. Mark had no idea his actions had been so meticulously observed. Ella had never told anyone the full extent of her emotional pain, the late nights spent crying, the mocking laughter Mark had shared with his friends at her expense. The judge's words now brought all of that to light, casting a harsh light on the man who had once been her husband. As the final words of the will were read, Mark's face twisted with anger. He stood abruptly, slamming his hand on the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. But the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Davidson," he said, his voice firm and unwavering, "you have no claim to this estate. It is Ella's, as it was always meant to be." Ella sat quietly, a calmness sweeping over her as she absorbed the full impact of what had just happened. This wasn't just about money. This was about her father's final recognition of her strength, her resilience, and her ability to endure the unthinkable. For once, Mark was the one who had no power. As the courtroom session came to a close, the door to the next chapter of Ella's life began to open. The inheritance, while significant, wasn't what mattered most. The validation, the acknowledgement from her father, who had always been there in the background, silently watching over her, was what mattered. Mark, now a broken man, stood at the back of the courtroom, his suit no longer providing him with the power it once did. He had lost everything, not just the fortune he had thought would be his, but his dignity, his reputation, and, most importantly, his hold over Ella. Ella stood up, her hands trembling but her heart strong. She looked toward the judge and then turned to face Mark one final time. She could feel the weight of the past years lifting from her shoulders. She had survived. She had endured. As she walked out of the courtroom, her head held high, she realized that no amount of money could replace the strength she had found within herself. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The world was finally seeing her for who she truly was, a woman who had fought through adversity and come out stronger on the other side. This moment, this victory, would resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. It was a triumph of strength over adversity, and it was a lesson that everyone in that courtroom would never forget. Ella stepped out of the courthouse, her heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythmic echo. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, but there was also a sense of lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. She walked down the steps, her gaze focused ahead, the cool breeze lifting her hair as she exited the building. The world outside felt different, somehow brighter. But it wasn't just the fresh air or the sunlight. It was the realization that everything had changed. She had always been the one who fought to keep things together, who tried to maintain peace, even at the cost of her own well-being. But now, for the first time in a long time, Ella felt like she was truly in control of her life. Her phone buzzed in her purse, breaking her thoughts. She pulled it out, seeing a message from her best friend, Tara. "I'm so proud of you, Ella. I know this wasn't easy, but you did it. Are you okay?" The words on the screen felt like a warm hug, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Ella smiled. She quickly typed back, "I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I just got the thing I've been needing for so long. Freedom." Tara's response was immediate. I knew you had it in you. Let's get together soon. I'm here for you always." Ella tucked the phone back into her purse, looking up at the street ahead. The city was bustling with life, the noise and movement all around her. She felt like a small part of it, yet for the first time, she felt as though she was part of something bigger than herself. The feeling was strange but welcome. Mark's words and actions had always loomed over her, dictating the course of her life in ways she couldn't quite explain. But now, as the weight of the will's reading settled in, Ella felt a sense of liberation. It wasn't just about the inheritance or the material wealth, it was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her future. The world she had once been afraid to navigate was now hers to shape. She had always been afraid of what would happen if she left Mark, afraid of how people would perceive her, afraid of what it would mean for her identity. But now, standing on the edge of something new, she realized that the fear had always been a cage, and she had the key all along. As she walked down the street, her mind wandered back to the years she had spent with Mark. The hurtful comments, the constant undermining, the times he had made her feel as though she didn't deserve any better. She remembered the moments when she had tried to speak up, only to be shut down, the way he had always found a way to make her feel small. But now she was free from the emotional chains he had wrapped around her, free from the weight of his indifference, and free from the fear that had once controlled her. She had been given a gift, a chance to start over. But this time she would do it on her own terms. The inheritance wasn't just a financial windfall. It was a symbol of something much deeper. It was the acknowledgement that she had endured, that she had fought against the tide and had come out stronger on the other side. It was a declaration that she had been seen, and in that moment, that recognition meant more than any amount of money ever could. As she reached the street corner, Ella stopped for a moment and looked up at the sky. The clouds were parting, and for the first time in a long time, the sun felt warm on her skin. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, allowing the moment to wash over her. She could feel her father's presence in the air, his love and support wrapping around her like a blanket. She had always known that her father believed in her. He had always been there, in the background, watching over her, even when she couldn't see it. But now, with his final gift, she could feel that love more than ever. She opened her eyes, a new sense of purpose filling her chest. She was going to honor his memory, honor herself, and build the life she had always deserved. Ella pulled her phone out again and typed a message to Tara. "Let's meet tomorrow. I have a lot to share with you. I think things are finally starting to make sense." Tara replied quickly, "I can't wait. I'll be there." As Ella put her phone away, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly connected to the people who loved her, to the friends who had stood by her through everything. She felt a sense of belonging that had eluded her for so long. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. There would be obstacles, challenges, and moments of doubt. But for the first time, Ella felt ready to face them. The years of silence, the years of being overlooked and dismissed, had shaped her into someone who was now ready to stand tall, to speak up, and to take control of her destiny. As she walked away from the courthouse, she realized that this moment, this turning point, was just the beginning. It wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something much greater. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid of it. She was going to write her own story, one that was filled with strength, resilience, and the kind of love that she had always deserved. And for the first time, Ella Johnson could say, with complete certainty, that she was proud of the woman she had become. The rest of her life was waiting for her, and she was ready to embrace it. As she walked down the street, her steps were no longer weighed down by the past. They were light, purposeful, and full of promise. She was free. Ella sat in the cozy cafe, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly as she waited for Tara. The familiar hum of conversations around her felt distant, almost muted, as her thoughts drifted to the events that had transpired in the courthouse. She had never imagined that a moment as seemingly insignificant as signing divorce papers could lead to such a seismic shift in her life. And yet, here she was, sitting on the brink of something new, something that felt both exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The air in the cafe was warm, comforting. She had come here to clear her mind, to let the events settle. But no matter how hard she tried to quiet the noise in her head, Ella couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of change that was unfolding. It was as though her entire life had been turned upside down in a single day. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but the universe seemed to be pushing her towards something she had only dreamed of before. Tara's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling Ella back to the present. "Ella!" Tara's infectious energy filled the space as she made her way to the table, her presence a welcome comfort. "I've been texting you for the last 10 minutes. You're not even responding to me." Tara slid into the seat across from her, a big smile on her face, though her eyes were filled with concern. "Are you okay? Really, are you?" Ella took a deep breath, forcing herself to snap out of her daze. "I'm okay, Tara. I'm more than okay. She paused, trying to find the right words. "It's all so overwhelming, you know? One moment I'm fighting to get through the day, and the next, I'm given this." She waved a hand, gesturing vaguely as if to encompass the inheritance, the legal victory, and everything that had happened in the courtroom. Tara leaned forward, her expression softening. "You've been through so much, Ella. It's not just about the money. It's about everything. It's about you finally getting the validation, the recognition you've deserved for so long. That man, Mark, he had no right to treat you the way he did, and now look at you. You've got everything in your hands, not just the inheritance, but the strength to leave him behind." Ella nodded slowly. Tara was right. It wasn't just about the money. It had never been. The inheritance was a symbol, a tool, but the real prize was the liberation, the self-recognition. For so long, Ella had put Mark's needs ahead of her own, always compromising, always sacrificing her peace for his comfort. She had lived in his shadow, always striving to gain his approval, even when it meant losing herself. But now, she was free of that. Tara smiled warmly, her hand gently resting on Ella's. "So, what's next for you, huh? What are you going to do with all this newfound freedom?" Ella looked down at her coffee, swirling it in her cup. She had asked herself that very question for the past hour. What was next? The answer, though uncertain, was becoming clearer with each passing moment. "I don't know, Tara," Ella admitted. "But I think I need to take some time for myself. I need to figure out who I am now, outside of that marriage, outside of what people think I should be. I've spent so long being what Mark wanted me to be, what everyone expected me to be. I need to rediscover myself." Tara's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with pride. "I think that's the best thing you could do, Ella. Take your time. You've earned it." Ella's thoughts wandered back to the moments she had shared with Mark. The late-night arguments, the empty apologies, the moments when he would apologize for his behavior, but then, as if on cue, revert back to the same old patterns. It was a cycle she had never been able to break, and now, in the quiet aftermath of the divorce, she could finally see it for what it was: manipulation. He had tried to control her, mold her into someone she was not, someone who would tolerate his abuse, his disregard. But Ella was done tolerating. She had lived under his thumb for far too long, and she was no longer afraid to step into her own light. Tara leaned back in her chair, folding her arms thoughtfully. "Do you ever wonder why you stayed for so long? I mean, it must have been hard, knowing deep down that you weren't being treated the way you should have been." Ella sighed, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "I think it's because I kept hoping it would get better. I kept believing that love was enough to fix things, that maybe if I just loved him more, he would change. But love isn't enough when the other person isn't willing to do the work. I stayed because I thought I had to. Because I thought that's what you do when you're married. You fight through the pain. But what I've realized now is that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do." Tara's eyes softened, her expression full of understanding. "That's the truth, Ella. You didn't deserve any of that." "You never have." Ella nodded, her throat tight as emotion bubbled up. "I didn't deserve it. But I'm not going to let it define me anymore." There was a brief silence between them as they both let the weight of the conversation settle. Finally, Tara spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "You're not the same person you were when you walked into that courthouse, Ella. You've already started your journey to reclaim yourself. And I know you're going to do amazing things. Whatever you choose to do next, I'm here for you." Ella's heart swelled with gratitude for Tara's unwavering support. She had always been there for her, through every storm and every triumph. "Thank you, Tara. I couldn't have made it this far without you." Tara grinned, her energy infectious. "Of course. Now, we're going to celebrate this victory, right? I'm taking you out tonight. It's time to let loose." Ella laughed, feeling a sense of lightness in her chest that had been absent for so long. "I think I'd like that," she said, a smile creeping onto her face. For the first time in a long while, Ella felt the weight of the world lifting off her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she was ready to face it, head on. As she sat across from Tara, the weight of the past few days starting to sink in, Ella made a promise to herself. She would rebuild her life. She would no longer be defined by Mark or anyone else's expectations. The next chapter of her story was waiting, and she was finally ready to write it. The evening that followed was a blur of laughter and warmth. Ella, dressed in a simple yet elegant dress that she hadn't worn in years, felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. She and Tara had gone to a cozy, dimly lit restaurant in the heart of the city, the kind of place that made you feel like time slowed down just for you. It was intimate, with soft jazz playing in the background and the faint scent of rosemary and garlic in the air. Tara had insisted on ordering a bottle of wine, and for the first time in a long time, Ella allowed herself to relax. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, turbulent, raw, and at times overwhelming. But tonight she let herself feel something else: freedom. For the first time in years, she wasn't tied to anyone's expectations but her own. "To new beginnings," Tara toasted, her glass raised high. Ella clinked her glass against Tara's, a genuine smile spreading across her face. To new beginnings. It wasn't just a toast for tonight, it was a declaration. A promise to herself that the days of being silenced, of second-guessing her worth, were behind her. She had come so far, and now with the will, the inheritance, and the truth finally out in the open, she was ready to embrace the future with everything she had. The conversation flowed naturally as they shared stories and caught up. But a part of Ella's mind kept drifting back to the moment in the courthouse. The look on Mark's face when the judge read her father's will still lingered in her thoughts. He had been so sure of his victory, so convinced that everything he wanted would fall into his lap. But when the truth was revealed, when everything he thought he was entitled to was snatched away, it had been nothing short of poetic justice. Tara noticed the brief flicker of thought in Ella's eyes and leaned forward. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" Ella nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess I am. I can't help but wonder what he's thinking now. He's always been so sure of himself, so smug about everything he had. But I wonder if he's ever going to realize that he lost more than money." Tara raised an eyebrow. "You mean the way he lost control over you?" Ella paused, letting the words sink in. "Yeah, that. I spent so many years trying to please him, trying to keep the peace, trying to make it work. But I can't keep doing that anymore. Not for him. Not for anyone." Tara smiled gently, understanding more than Ella realized. "You're finally seeing your own value, Ella. It took all this to get here, but you've always been worthy. It just took you a little while to recognize it. But now that you have, don't let anyone take that from you again." Ella felt a lump rise in her throat as Tara's words hit home. She had always known deep down that she deserved better, but it had taken years of self-doubt and quiet suffering before she had the courage to take that first step. Now the road ahead seemed daunting in its own way, but for the first time she felt equipped to face it. As they finished their meal and made their way out of the restaurant, the cool night air felt like a refreshing embrace. The city lights twinkled around them, and Ella took a deep breath, allowing the peaceful energy of the night to settle over her. Tara linked her arm with Ella's, pulling her closer as they strolled down the sidewalk. "You know, we should take a trip," Tara said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Somewhere far away." "Somewhere beautiful. Just you and me and maybe a little bit of adventure." Ella smiled at the thought. It had been a long time since she had allowed herself to imagine something carefree, something without the heavy weight of responsibility and expectation. "That sounds amazing, Tara. I think I'd like that. Maybe it's time I start doing things for me." Tara grinned. "Exactly. No more living for anyone else. It's your time, Ella." Ella could feel the truth in those words. It was her time. She had spent so long worrying about everyone else, about Mark, about family, about doing what others expected of her. But now it was time to live for herself, to be the person she had always been meant to be. She wasn't sure where the road would lead her, but for the first time, she felt like she was walking down it with confidence, with a sense of purpose. As they walked, Tara continued chatting about potential destinations, but Ella's mind wandered to her future, to the life she was about to build. She had already started the process of hiring a financial advisor, someone who could help her navigate the inheritance and put it to good use. She was determined not to let it go to waste, but she also wanted to ensure it empowered her to follow her true passions. As the night came to a close, they stopped at a small ice cream stand, something nostalgic that Ella had loved when she was younger. She ordered her favorite, a rich, creamy vanilla bean cone, and handed the money to the vendor. As she took the first bite, the sweetness of the ice cream was a stark contrast to the bitterness of the past. "This is perfect," Ella said, her voice soft. Tara looked at her with a knowing smile. "Perfect for a perfect night." Ella laughed lightly, savoring the ice cream as they stood on the corner. The future still seemed uncertain, but for the first time, it wasn't terrifying. There were no more shadows from her past looming over her. She could finally see a horizon without fear of what might come next. The feeling was new, and it was empowering. In the weeks that followed, Ella continued to adjust to her new life. The inheritance provided her with the financial stability she had longed for, but more importantly, it allowed her the freedom to take control of her destiny. She began attending therapy, something she had put off for far too long, in order to heal from the emotional scars Mark had left behind. She started taking painting classes, a passion she had long buried in the pursuit of pleasing others. She also joined a group of women entrepreneurs, finding support and inspiration as she began to build her own business, something she had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk, staring at the sketches of a potential new venture, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Tara. "Are you still up for that trip? I found the perfect spot, a little cottage by the beach. We can go next month if you're ready." Ella smiled, her heart swelling with excitement. "Count me in." It was time for a new adventure, time for her to step fully into her power. Ella had reclaimed her life, and now she was going to live it on her own terms, without hesitation or apology. The rest of the world would have to keep up. The weeks that followed Ella's decision to embrace her newfound freedom were filled with self-discovery and unexpected joys. For the first time in years, she found herself waking up with a sense of purpose, not driven by the weight of someone else's expectations or the remnants of a life she was no longer tied to. The routine she had once dreaded had transformed into an exciting opportunity to reinvent herself. Ella took the time to establish her own business, something she had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue while she was married. With the inheritance her father had left her, she hired a small team, people who believed in her vision and were willing to support her as she ventured into the unknown. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. This was her dream, her passion, her future. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be pursuing something that was entirely her own. She had spent so many years living in the shadows of others' lives, always sacrificing her own desires to fit the mold of what was expected of her. But now she was finally free to be herself. Even her personal life began to shift. The therapy sessions she had started attending were paying off in ways she had never anticipated. The emotional scars from her marriage were deep, but with each session, she learned to let go of the anger, the self-doubt, and the fear that had consumed her for so long. She learned how to forgive herself, to stop blaming herself for things that were never her fault. The weight of the years of abuse slowly lifted from her shoulders, and she began to feel lighter, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Tara had been her rock throughout this transformation, encouraging her every step of the way. The two friends had spent countless hours together, discussing everything from Ella's business to her therapy progress. But more than that, Tara had helped Ella remember who she truly was, a woman capable of anything, strong beyond measure, and worthy of every bit of happiness life had to offer. And so, when Tara suggested they finally go on that trip, the one they had talked about for so long, Ella was ready. ready to leave the past behind, ready to take her first step into a world where the only thing that mattered was her happiness. They had chosen a small beach town on the coast, far from the city, where the rhythm of the ocean would serve as a reminder of how far Ella had come. The day they arrived, Ella felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over her as they stood on the sand, the ocean stretching out before them like an endless horizon. The salty air filled her lungs, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to soothe the deepest parts of her soul. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle wind brush against her skin, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to simply be. "Can you believe how far you've come?" Tara asked, as they stood at the water's edge watching the sun dip below the horizon. Ella shook her head, still in awe of the transformation she had undergone. "I can't, but it feels right, you know? Like all the pieces are finally falling into place." Tara smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You've always been strong, Ella. You just needed to remember it." As the days passed in the quiet beach town, Ella found herself slowly letting go of the last remnants of her past. She wasn't running from anything anymore. The sand beneath her feet reminded her that she was grounded in this moment, in the present, and that the future was full of endless possibilities. Tara and Ella spent their days walking along the beach, having long talks under the stars, and simply enjoying each other's company. There was no rush, no expectations, just the two of them, embracing the beauty of the world around them. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the small cottage they had rented, Tara turned to Ella, her voice quieter than usual. "Ella, I've been thinking about something." Ella looked at her, curiosity piqued. "What's that?" "I know you've come so far, and I know you're focused on your business and the future. But what about love? Do you ever think about that again? About opening yourself up to someone?" The question caught Ella off guard, and for a moment, she was silent. Love. After everything she had been through, it felt like a distant concept, something she hadn't even dared to consider. But as she looked out at the darkening sky, the stars beginning to twinkle, she realized that Tara had a point. She wasn't the same woman who had been trapped in that marriage. She wasn't the same person who had been afraid to love and be loved. But was she ready to love again? "I don't know," Ella said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm still figuring that out. I've been so focused on healing, on rebuilding myself, that love hasn't really crossed my mind. But I do think, maybe someday." She paused, taking a deep breath, as if letting the idea sink in. "I guess I'm just scared, Tara. Scared that I might fall into the same patterns, scared that I won't be able to trust again." Tara nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "That's okay. It's okay to be scared. But don't let fear stop you from opening yourself up to the possibility of happiness. You deserve to experience love in all its forms, whether it's from a partner, friends, or even yourself. And you don't have to rush. When the time is right, you'll know. But for now, focus on enjoying the journey. You're still growing, and that's beautiful." Ella smiled at Tara, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. You've been with me through all of this. And I can't even begin to explain how much your support has meant to me." Tara reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'll always be here for you, Ella, no matter what." The days on the beach ended all too quickly, and soon, Ella and Tara were back in the city. But for Ella, the trip had been more than just a getaway. It had been a reminder that the world was vast, full of opportunity and beauty. It had shown her that, despite everything she had endured, there was still so much life to live. She didn't need to rush. She didn't need to have all the answers right away. The future was hers to create, and she was ready to embrace it fully, one step at a time. Back at home, Ella threw herself into her work with renewed passion. Her business began to take off, and the confidence she had once lacked began to fill every aspect of her life. She no longer worried about what others thought of her or whether she was making the right choices. She was making choices for herself, and that was all that mattered. As months passed, Ella kept building her new life, savoring the small victories and relishing in the quiet moments of peace she had never known before. And when she was ready, When her heart was healed enough to consider love again, she knew she would be ready. She would never forget the lessons she had learned during this journey, the importance of self-love, of embracing one's own strength, and of never settling for less than what she deserved. Ella Johnson was no longer the woman who had walked into the courthouse that day, unsure of herself and the future. She was a woman who had reclaimed her power, her life, and her happiness. And that was just the beginning.